Could you provide an overview of the legal framework governing the operations of UNIFIL forces in Lebanon and the implications of these repeated Israeli attacks?
Yes. The UNIFIL forces in the south of Lebanon have been mandated by the United Nations Security Council back in the late 70s, in 1978, but also again in a new resolution in 2006. These forces are peacekeeping forces that are supposed to observe the border, to observe any breach of the ceasefire that was decided then, and to report back to the United Nations. Peacekeeping forces should not be targeted by any of the conflicting parties. The fact that the Israeli army has targeted these forces more than once now is an assault, first on the United Nations, but also on international humanitarian law, which regulates, it regulates the way that states conduct war and the type of targets that are admissible by international law. And this is not admissible. Hitting and targeting UN forces, peacekeeping forces, is a grave breach of international humanitarian law, which means that it is a war crime.
Thank you for that, Professor. And now to Beirut, Saeed Al-Qaza. How do you view the recent Israeli attacks on UNIFIL forces, and what do you think might be the implications for peacekeeping operations in Lebanon?
Good evening, sir. Good evening, dear audience. Targeting the peacekeeping forces working in South Lebanon is a great breach of the international humanitarian law. It's also a violation of Resolution 1701, one that grants the peacekeeping forces operating in South Lebanon the mandate to support the Lebanese army to maintain peace and stability and security and evacuate the area from the armed people. The Israeli enemy forces commits only crimes and massacres, war crimes and crimes against humanity. Also, their aggression against the peacekeeping forces is a war crime that it should be held accountable for in the International Court of Justice.
And going back to you, Professor Nasibeh, how do these repeated Israeli strikes against UNIFIL forces reflect on the legality of their military targets, Israel's military targets, within the context of international law in which you're an expert?
Thank you very much for your very good question, actually. The targeting of UN forces could not have happened if Israel has not enjoyed full impunity for all the attacks that it has been implementing against the civilian population, both in Lebanon and, of course, in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip and other locations. The fact that Israel has, until today, not been sanctioned by the UN Security Council, and of course there are the UN's General Assembly has decided sanctions, and there are certain individual countries that have actually started to sanction Israel in many different ways. But the fact that these sanctions are still very limited means that Israel can continue to breach international law, breach the orders of the International Court of Justice, and feel secure, and feel that these crimes and these violations will not bring about any consequences for the state of Israel. So I would actually, and by the way, this is not the only attack now against the UN. Israel has also decided to prohibit the work of the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees, the UNRWA, in parts of Palestine, including occupied Jerusalem. And until now, all we hear is condemnations and criticism. In some cases, even this criticism is very shy. As long as there is no accountability for violations and for crimes, Israel will continue to breach international law, will continue with the genocide, will continue ignoring the UN and blaming the UN and all of its legal experts and human rights rapporteurs that Israel will continue to blame all of them instead of abiding by its international law obligations.
So the professor says that it's not just happening in Lebanon, it's also happening where he is as well. Mr. Al-Qaza, what do you believe are the motivations behind Israel's repeated attacks on UN forces?
Sir, I'd like to add that there was an incident in 1996. So it's not the first time that the Israeli forces attacked the UN premises and they were not held accountable. In 1996, the enemy forces struck a center for UNIFIL, where the displaced people took shelter in that place, and Qana massacre took place. If many of your audience remember it, Qana massacre resulted in 200 martyrs. I witnessed this firsthand. I contributed in the work of transferring the corpse of dead people and the children and so on. So the United Nations warned UNIFIL to move away from the borders and leave their centers in the blue line in order to have a freedom in the movement. If they decided to invade the south of Lebanon, or a ground offensive, of course. So these places do not allow the UNIFIL to prevent the Israeli forces from moving forward with their military power, because the mandate given to UNIFIL or the emergency forces, they were granted these mandates by Resolution 1701 in 2006, which stipulates to apply or implement security with the economic sanctions, dialogue, and so on. Chapter 7, that mandates the emergency forces, does not allow them to use power to impose peace. So the Israeli enemy now does not want to have any eyewitness for the things they do. That's why they ask the emergency forces to withdraw from the borders and from their centers on the blue line. When the emergency forces didn't respond and refused this, they started to harass their centers to say that UNIFIL or these emergency forces are exposed to being fired or struck, and that's why they have to withdraw to protect their soldiers.
Thank you for that, and your personal experience there sounds particularly harrowing. Professor Nasibeh, a similar question to you. What are the potential motives, do you think, behind Israel's increased military actions in Lebanon and also where you are as well? Why do they do this? What's their game?
Unfortunately, in the Gaza Strip, the plan has been clear. Israel started massively displacing Palestinians from the north of the Strip to the south. They are trying to displace the Palestinians outside the Gaza Strip totally and outside Palestine. There are a lot of campaigns, including by governmental officials, who want to build settler colonies for Israel in the Gaza Strip. Unfortunately, I'm observing a very similar pattern in the south of Lebanon. As we could see during the past period, Israel is continuing to displace the Lebanese civilian population in masses towards the north. It is making sure that the Lebanese population does not feel safe in their homes. And there are also campaigns for settlements colonial settlements in Lebanon. So unfortunately, my fear is that it's not only using this force, this genocidal force in both areas, only to show that they are powerful and to win a war, but I'm afraid that they are also working towards their colonial objectives quite actively.
And Mr. Al-Qaza, in your opinion, do these attacks constitute violations of international law? Of course, you've mentioned Resolution 1701. And what do you think is going to be done about it?
Yes, I also mentioned that these attacks are a violation of the international humanitarian law. Yes, I also said that the Israeli enemy should be brought to court for attacking the UNIFIL forces in the International Court of Justice. Yes, these are violations. To respond to what your dear guest said regarding his fears and concerns, I'd like to reassure him that the Israeli forces cannot build any settlements in south of Lebanon, because if this is their intention and they want to realize this, then the whole Lebanese people will unify behind the Lebanese army and the Lebanese state in order to defend Lebanon and to expel Israelis from the Lebanese territories. We watched this before when the whole Lebanese people were unified before the year 2000. When the Israeli enemy occupied the south of Lebanon, so under the strikes, they had to withdraw. And if now they want to build colonies in southern Lebanon, I think all of these are dreams that cannot come true, because then the whole Lebanese people will be supporting the Lebanese state and the Lebanese army, and the enemy forces will never manage to stay in the south of Lebanon. That's what I want to reassure your guest with.
Okay, well, thank you very much to both of you for your input so far, but please stay with me. We're going to come back and we're going to discuss this a little bit more. First of all, let's take a short break to